So I've been thinking about doing some Iceberg videos recently. I don't know, they just seem like nice, easy, fun videos to make. So I was looking for some movie-related icebergs on Reddit, and I came across this one, which is a James Bond iceberg, and I thought it would be interesting. And full disclosure, I wouldn't really consider myself a James Bond fan or anything. I've seen maybe about 10 movies, which is probably more than most people my age have seen. But you know, I do enjoy them. Most of the time. Some of the time. Anyway, let's get started. This one's obvious. There's 25 different James Bond movies with 6 different actors playing James Bond. Not much to say. I mean, it's what everybody knows. I mean, this one's self-explanatory. It's also untrue, technically. We'll get into that later. You'll see why. This one is referring to a video and a live performance made for the opening ceremonies for the 2012 London Olympics. It shows James Bond going to Buckingham Palace and picking up the Queen in a helicopter, where they fly to the stadium and they skydive into the stadium. The video is a little weird and a little awkward, but also, you know, it's kind of charming for a opening ceremonies for the Olympics. If you didn't know, most of the James Bond films are based off of a book series written by Ian Fleming. There are 14 of them, and the latest film to be derived from the books is The Living Daylights with the Timothy Dalton Bond. Well, if we're getting technical, I guess Casino Royale with Daniel Craig is the newest film from the book series. But there was a Casino Royale movie that was made as sort of a parody of the spy genre, but it is actually based off of the Ian Fleming book, Casino Royale. This is a popular theory that explains the reason why there are different actors playing Bond throughout the series. Basically, James Bond is just a codename, not an actual single person. So Sean Connery, Roger Moore, Daniel Craig, everyone else, they're all different people under the same identity. One of the biggest arguments for this theory comes in on Her Majesty's Secret Service when George Lazenby's Bond, after rescuing a woman from a couple of goons only to have her drive off, he says,
"This never happened to the other fella."
Obviously addressing the fact that he's taken the role as James Bond from Sean Connery. Counter theory. No, the same movie can be used as a counter-argument for the theory. In the movie, James Bond's wife, Tracy, dies. This event, down to the name, is referenced in other Bond movies with other actors. Another blow to this theory is in Skyfall, where James Bond visits his family home and visits the grave of both of his parents, who are both named Bond. This would be suggesting that his actual birth name is Bond instead of a codename. And I'd actually like to propose my own theory that James Bond is actually a vampire, perhaps even artificially created by MI6. So yes, Sean Connery and Daniel Craig are the same person. I'm sure Bond gets like a, facial reconstruction surgery like every decade or so. Of course, to fool his enemies.
A film theory.
This one's pretty obvious. There are about 25 official James Bond video games, with the most famous being GoldenEye for the N64. I've only played like a couple of them, but my personal favorite is Nightfire, which I played on the PS2 as a kid. I'll never forget using those remote-controlled missiles on that snowy map, the one with the castle and the little house. If you know what I'm talking about, you're a real one. Oh, and by the way, this is the first James Bond video game. Raul Silva, the villain from Skyfall, used to be an MI6 agent who worked alongside M. And that's not even a theory, that's actually from the movie. So if you want all that explained, just go watch the movie. We got bigger fish to fry. It's a little misleading to call this a cancelled cameo, when in reality it never even got that close to happening. Sam Mendes, the director of Skyfall, went so far as to call it a brief flirtation with the idea. If they had gone through with it, Connery would have played the groundskeeper for Bond's parents' estate. Although, even if this idea was seriously being considered, it would be very unlikely to happen because Connery was already retired at that time, and he didn't even come out of retirement to make a cameo in the Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull movie, so really it was just something that was never going to happen. Young Bond is a YA book series, which is of course about a young James Bond. The series started in 2005 and went on to have 9 main books, plus a collection of short stories and even a graphic novel. It's obviously just what it sounds like. A young James Bond in the 1930s, going off, getting in trouble, having adventures. You get the idea. So apparently back when it was revealed that Daniel Craig was going to be the next James Bond, people had quite a few doubts as to whether he could pull it off or not, which, looking back, now that we know that Daniel Craig actually did a very good job as Bond, it seems pretty weird, but you know, that's how it was. Well, when Daniel Craig made a very sexy emergence from the ocean in Casino Royale, people were starting to come on board. So much so that the swim trunks he was wearing in that scene were selling out weeks after the movie's release. Honestly, I think that little factoid right there is a little more interesting than what this section is actually supposed to be about. When it says Casino Royale sandbar incident, I'm thinking like, you know, an incident. I thought it would be like, you know, a boat coming along and hitting the sandbar and crashing and, you know, maybe injuring or killing a couple people. But no, it's just Daniel Craig hitting his head on the sandbar, and then he gets up and, you know, rubs his head a little bit and walks to the beach. So that's the incident. Robert Markham is a pseudonym for the authors of a James Bond series that started in 1968. Different authors would be writing different entries into the series under the name, the first being Kinsley Amis, who wrote Colonel Sun. Alright, more books. I knew there were a few James Bond novels, but I didn't think it was going to be this many. The first rendition of James Bond Jr. came out as a novel written in 1967 called The Adventures of James Bond Jr. 003½. There were also some comic books, video games, and a TV show, all with the same idea. The animated show came out in 1991 and did okay, but it was kind of lost to the sands of time.
Ah, yes, Mr. Bond. James Bond, Jr.
This one is sort of a theory/question as to whether or not the M we see in the Pierce Brosnan Bond movies, who is played by Judi Dench, is the same M that we see in the Daniel Craig Bond movies, who is also played by Judi Dench. Their personalities are a little different, but that's obviously just because there are different people behind the movies, and it wouldn't really make sense for it to be the same character at all. I think the people behind Casino Royale were just like, oh yeah, Judi Dench, she was pretty good as M. Let's try to get her back, yeah. That's it, end of story. We don't need to bring codename theory into all of this. They're just making movies. They just want to make money, okay? That's it. Hey, speaking of money, Kevin McClory was a screenwriter and producer in the 1960s who, alongside Ian Fleming and Jack Whittingham, co-wrote a film or television project based off of the James Bond character. When that didn't go anywhere, Ian Fleming took it and wrote it as a novel, titling it Thunderball. However, after he wrote it, he never credited Kevin McClory or Jack Whittingham, who did most of the writing. Consequently, the both of them sued Ian Fleming, and the lawsuit was settled out of court. The results being that McClory and Whittingham were finally credited for the novel, and McClory was able to act as a producer for the film adaptation of Thunderball. McClory also went on to produce a sort of weird half spin-off James Bond movie called Never Say Never Again, which in 1983 featured Sean Connery reprising his role as James Bond. This is actually true. 8 years before Sean Connery took the role as James Bond in Dr. No. In 1954, the actor Barry Nelson took the role as James Bond in a television anthology series called Climax. This may have actually been a sort of pilot for a separate series featuring the James Bond character, but with a different actor, seeing as how Barry Nelson is not British, he's American.
Jimmy, listen to me.
I'm going to. And so's he. You're going to tell me those things right now.
And he doesn't even put on like a British accent or anything. He's just an American, which is weird for an MI6 agent. I don't know. Maybe he's undercover or something. I don't know. Whatever. You do you. For this one, the details aren't exactly clear, and I don't even know if it's true or not. What is true is that both Ian Fleming and Christopher Lee are step-cousins and also good friends. And they both did serve in World War II, with Lee especially having an extensive military background. But I haven't found anything concrete to actually suggest that they were working together during World War II. Ian Fleming did propose a role to Lee as Dr. No in Dr. No, but by the time that Lee accepted and Fleming went to the producers, they had already chosen Joseph Wiseman to play the role. Although later in the series, Lee would be coming back to play as the man with the golden gun in The Man with the Golden Gun. This entry is referring to the similarities between Spectre and Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, which both came out in 2015. In Spectre, James Bond, behind the backs of the MI6, tries to prove the existence of the evil secret organization of Spectre so as to protect the MI6 from being dismantled for it being outdated and irrelevant. For Rogue Nation, take that same sentence and replace James Bond with Ethan Hunt, MI6 with IMF, and Spectre with the Syndicate. And there's a bunch of other similarities too, like with characters and plot points, but really most of it isn't that big of a stretch. It's just really coincidental that both of them happen to come out at the same time. In most of the original James Bond novels, instead of Spectre being the ultimate antagonist organization, it's a Russian organization called SMERSH, which was based off of the real-life Soviet-era counter-spy agency with the same name. The change from SMERSH to Spectre happened when Ian Fleming, Jack Whittingham, and Kevin McClory were working on Thunderball, with Fleming being the one to actually suggest that it stopped being used. This was in the case that the Cold War would slow down and end peacefully. From that point on, SMERSH was never used as an enemy in any of the Bond films from Dr. No onward. Shortly after the release of Goldfinger, Israel banned the movie because of Gert Frobe, who played Goldfinger in the movie, admitted to being a member of the Nazi Party from 1929 to 1937, when he left because of his disagreements with the party. So that's 2 years before World War II. Although in 1944, Frobe actually got drafted into the war, so he did end up fighting for the German army, though it's possible that this was actually a punishment for him distributing anti-Nazi pamphlets during the war. In the same interview in which Frobe revealed that he used to be a Nazi, and which his films were subsequently banned for, he also stated that he was able to help 2 Jewish people during the war to acquire what were basically food stamps. As it turned out, the Holocaust survivor that Frobe helped heard of the ban and went to the Israeli embassy in Vienna to defend him. And it was this, along with the Israeli public demand to see Goldfinger, which got the film unbanned. So in the Goldfinger novel, the character Pussy Galore is actually a lesbian, like it's explicitly stated that she's a lesbian. However, this changes when James Bond, comes onto her, and then she basically turns straight after that. In the book, Bond makes her straight. So yeah, by today's standard, it's a little... Ian Fleming even talked about the scene, saying that Bond was curing her psychopathological malady. So yeah, pretty weird. Also pretty So this one is apparently saying that the latest James Bond movie, No Time to Die, is a remake of the 2004 James Bond video game featuring Pierce Brosnan called Everything or Nothing. I don't really believe it. I will say that I didn't really dig that much into it because I still haven't seen No Time to Die, so I was kind of avoiding spoiler territory there. But even still, I couldn't really find anything suggesting that the two were actually related, aside from the fact that the Bond villains in both basically use nanobots to, you know, carry out their evil plans. So, I mean, that's all I know. Yet another theory that has no substance behind it whatsoever. Maybe I'm not doing a very good job at finding these or something. I don't know, but I literally cannot find anything suggesting that the character Morzeni, who is a villain from the movie From Russia with Love, is the same person as General Gogol, who is the head of the KGB and is in a bunch of James Bond movies from the 70s and 80s. Now, they are played by the same actor, but that's it. I mean, to me, this theory doesn't really hold up very well, seeing as how Morzeni has a bunch of scars on his face and at the end of the movie dies in a fire. So, yeah, you don't really see anything like that with General Gogol. I mean, his face is like perfectly clear, so unless there's some sort of technology that can explain it, yeah, no. So that's it. We're all James Bond experts now. I hope you learned something. I don't know, maybe you can use this information the next time you watch a James Bond movie with your dad. Because really, James Bond movies are the most dad movies out there, am I right? Give a video a like if you watched James Bond movies with your dad as a kid and had to sit awkwardly through the sex scenes. It happens to everyone. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you have any ideas for the next video, go ahead and drop it in the comments. And yeah, that'll be it for me.